You're listening to the Entrepreneurs Next Door podcast.
Work's been breaking my back, already packing my bags. Punch that time card like a ticket out of here.
If you don't like Italian food, then I have to apologize, but we can't be friends. Today's episode is sponsored by the creators of the best cannolis I've ever had, and certainly I've had my fair share of cannolis. My wife's maiden name is De Bonaventura, so you know cannolis and Italian food are second nature for our family. Valenti's Italian Specialties. Yep, they're still making it the way Nonna did. Go ahead, pause this episode, go grab a cannoli from Valenti's, find a comfy chair, and turn up the volume on the rest of this episode, because you aren't going to want to miss a single word from Benita Cooper. Her wealth of knowledge and the richness of her perspective on education, family, and how she balances multiple projects at the same time is absolutely, well, you should listen and decide how amazing this episode is. Please enjoy. Benita, it's great to have you here. I love working with your sons at the martial arts school. Jet and Kian are they're great young men. And I'm really excited to do this episode with you today and to hear more about you. Stories are amazing, like we just talked about, and we're gonna jump right in. But welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, we kind of want to know, where did this all begin? When did your entrepreneurial journey begin?
I'd say, if you talk in practical terms, my firm, Benita Cooper Design, started in 2008. My nonprofit, The Best Day of My Life So Far, started exactly 10 years ago, 2009. We're celebrating our 10th anniversary this year.
Awesome.
But more deeply and more personally, I think I'm one of those people who have always had this desire to work and explore and roll up their sleeves and just make things happen. I think it's in my nature and my gut to be aware of problems, big and small, around me, and always want to dive in and fix them. I think at its fundamental essence, that's what being an entrepreneur is.
Well, that's great. You're hitting one of my questions before I could even get to it.
What's that?
What is entrepreneurship, right? It's a little different for everybody. It's not always having a company with 100 people. Sometimes it's having a company with just one person, and that's you. And it just depends. So that you got ahead of me on that one. Nice job. But I want to know more. You said parents and a desire to work. Where did that come from? Did your parents instill that in you? Was it something you were born with? Where do you kind of see that coming from?
It's funny. Sometimes you don't realize certain things are in you until you see the things you're doing. So I'll backtrack a little bit and say that I was born in Seattle, but then grew up in Hong Kong as a baby until I was 12 years old. Left Hong Kong with my extended family before the Chinese government took it over from the British government a few years after. So at the point when I was in Hong Kong, I was living in a city that felt very international and cosmopolitan and free and in spirit. But there's a very strong Asian identity and root in the way I was brought up. At 12 years old, my extended family moved to Seattle, and then I was always very into reading English books, and math came very easily to me, even at a young age. So that was in Hong Kong. But it also meant that the transition to American culture was easy for me, because all of a sudden I started speaking in English, first with a British accent and then suddenly with an American accent. I just adapted really easily. And I think I discovered in myself this kind of almost fearlessness to just go to new places, new worlds, and just be open to new people and ideas. It was not scary for me, even though it was, I think, a cultural shock for most people in my shoes. So as a teenager, as a child and teenager, school was, I worked hard, but I didn't work excessively hard, and things did happen easily for me. I won awards in school in Hong Kong, and then when I was in Seattle, I took the PSATs or a bunch of tests and tested high, and I ended up skipping high school. Actually, I started college at 15. It's at a program, a very small schoolhouse that's held that is located on University of Washington campus. And they taught a different kind of thinking. They taught you to not think by reading just textbooks, but to discover kind of truths in your mind. So they would never give you a math formula and tell you to run numbers. They would hold back the next chapter in the math book and say, what do you think the next theorem is from the one that you just learned? With English literature, for example, they didn't give us the normal stuff. They said, you know what the normal stuff is, go read it at home. We're going to teach you new literature, the new stuff that might be a little confusing with messages that are like a bit complicated. We want you to find the messages in those. I think that year, I think the name is Early Entrance Program now. It changed a few times. That year was also very kind of eye-opening to me. Almost similar to moving to another culture. It just kind of like made your mind like expand in a million dimensions. And then I started college early. I said, I don't know if I said I started college early at 15.
You said you started when you were 15?
Yeah. So that program was when I was 14 years old to 15. And 2 years ago, I had moved from Hong Kong. So at age 15, I decided to double major in art and architecture. And so I'd always be at opposite ends of the campus just because that's where the two departments were. And art gave me a complete, it let me unleash my imagination and deep dive into my own identity. And architecture let me focus and solve problems and be analytical. And so I always had those two things going for me. And so I think somewhere along the way, I found my voice and a confidence, and also visual communication skills and other sorts of communication skills that were helpful to express that identity. So the drive that I was talking about to work was just kind of one thing leading into another. I mean, after I graduated with both degrees, I always worked, from whatever it was, 15 or 16 years old, I'd work through school, through the summers. I just loved contributing to society. I don't just want to collect knowledge. I want to apply every single piece of knowledge I learned. First, I worked at a pizza place. Then I worked at a makeup store. Then it became the architectural library. Then I started doing archiving at somebody's architectural office. And then I started getting real architecture jobs. And then worked my way up the ladder as I was going to school. I also worked at Harvard Design Magazine. Oh, that's obviously for grad school. So after I graduated from college, I worked a few years, and then I went to Harvard for grad school. It's called Graduate School of Design, GSD. That's the short term, or shorthand way it's called. But there I worked at Harvard Design Magazine. And every step was a further expansion of the sense of drive. There's always more to do, more problems to solve, more things to take care of in the world. And I want to make every day count.
It's so interesting. I mean, you just put so many different gems into that story, everywhere from, there's so much packed into that story that we could put hours into that. And I have one comment and then one question. And the comment is, I hear that a lot. People who are successful business owners and entrepreneurs working right away in high school. I did. So from the time I was 13, I started working in my dad's little shop, his machine shop, sweeping floors and going from there. And it just made sense to be doing something, sitting around, not contributing, like you said, or not working, not helping. It didn't seem right or natural. That's really interesting. So I connect with you big one a lot on that. And my question is, do you then see entrepreneurship, like owning a business, as a calling on your life, or is it not a calling? Is it a calling for some people, not for some people? I'd love to know your take on that, if people are called to it or not.
I feel like I'm the luckiest person on earth, first of all. And most of what has happened in my life, I didn't plan for or even know to dream of. I didn't wake up and say, or I wasn't a child that said, I'm going to own an architectural business. I said, I'm going to go to architecture school. I also never expected to also found a nonprofit. So I don't do things because I created a hypothetical framework in my head or a business plan on a sheet of paper. I do things because I sense in either my local environment or the world at large a need. And so for me, it's a very core sense of responsibility, not a hypothetical calling. Like, I started my architectural firm because a friend needed their house. Or sorry, at that point, he wasn't a friend, he was a client. Now we've become great friends. But a client needed his house redone because he and his wife, they were expecting their first child. They both work a lot, and it just needed to be done. And so I had to help. Like, it was a very valid reason to want to help. So I had a project. I needed to help them. So it wasn't like I had some business plan. I needed to work on this house. And same thing for my nonprofit. I just simply started with picking up the phone one day and calling my grandma for the first time ever in my life. I just felt homesick that one day and didn't plan to talk to her for more than a couple minutes, but instead we stayed on the phone for an hour, and she told me about her devastating childhood in a way that was so courageous and beautiful. And so that planted inspiration in my soul. And then I called her, and then I started a local storytelling group where I sat around a table with Philadelphia older adults to hear their stories, and then I shared their stories on a blog to their family and friends, and soon to the public. So for me, it was never like, honestly, I can't say I knew what I was doing when I was starting anything. I just was doing it because I have this like indescribable fearlessness in me that when I feel in my gut I need to do something, I will do it. It's almost irrational. It's very gut driven. So for other people who are trying to see if it's their calling to start a business, you need to get to a point where you can trust your gut. And the only way you can trust your gut is through hard work and experience. There is a process of self-discovery that typically would take more than 1 year. Like, it might take you like 10 years, whatever it is. And then all of a sudden you realize your gut is very clear. And that's when you know what you should do, because, everyone is different. And being an entrepreneur means you're also the person like taking out the trash, yep, like all the time, or like it's not for everybody. Like, some people get a feeling of stability going to a big office, getting a paycheck, having standard 9 to 5 hours, and that's perfectly respectable. And some people get a lot of fulfillment being a stay-at-home mom or a stay-at-home dad. That is perfectly respectable as well. Like, being an entrepreneur is just one option. I don't think like it has to be the only one. If it doesn't feel right, don't do it. If it feels right, go for it. But I mean, don't even listen to me. Don't even listen to anybody. It has to be from your gut.
Yeah. So you mentioned like that fearlessness. So for me, getting into entrepreneurship, it seemed like such a huge jump. Everything from how do I open an LLC to how do I pay taxes, how do I set up payroll for employees, everything. So what were those fears? You said you were fearless, but you only know you're fearless if there's something you're scared of that you attack and go after, right? So what were those like those barriers, those obstacles, those things that kind of loomed in front of you? And I'm sure it's different day to day, week to week, but I don't know if there's a couple of them you could point to. So people who maybe are like, I feel like I'm called to this, but it's just too scary. Could you shine any light on some of those obstacles and the fearlessness of pushing through them? And sometimes courage is not necessarily like a knight on horseback with a sword riding into battle, but it's putting your nose to the grind and making it happen. So I'd love to hear your take on that.
So I'm 39. I just turned 39, and I think when I hit 30, I stopped worrying about what other people perceived of my actions. That I think was maybe a fear in my 20s, and that's just human nature. I decided that if I am genuine and if I'm ethical, then my action will speak, and it doesn't matter what other people say. Like, I was no longer seeking approval or trying to fit anybody's mold. I was just trying to focus and do things right, to the best of my ability, with the understanding that I'm just human, I'm imperfect, but I will always try my best. Fear was a distraction. Fear is taking up time I don't have. Like, if there's ever any stress in my life, I stop for a minute, get a cup of coffee, go for a walk, and then I gotta move on and get working, like get into solving the problem. So it's also the expectation that there will always be curveballs, emergencies, things that go wrong, because I'm human and I live in a human world, but always feeling like there's a trust I have in the people around me, the resources and relationships I have built, that no matter what happens, I'll figure it out with teamwork.
Figuring it out. I mean, I think that right there, that just figure it out. I mean, that describes entrepreneurship, to such a T, because that's it. You figure it out. Like, okay, well, there's a need. Let's figure out how to meet it. We have to overcome this obstacle. Let's figure it out, and not just letting yourself get stuck, stay stationary, but continue to move forward. And even if it's just fumbling around, sometimes figure it out. I love it.
I also think I get a certain thrill out of an uncertain future. I like that because it drives me forward. Yeah. But for a different personality, it's scary. So I'm just, it fits me. I also, when I use the word gut, it's also a sort of moral compass. If you know your moral compass, you're always gonna know the direction you're going in, even if the future has not taken exact shape. So you just go in that direction.
It's awesome. Well, I mean, you have the nonprofit, you have the architecture business, but not necessarily for either of those businesses, or it could be. What's next for Benita Cooper? Is it a different avenue? Is it a different avenue within one of those existing organizations? What's next?
So besides those two jobs, I always have the job of being the best mom I can possibly be.
Which you do well.
Which I always say is the hardest job of all.
Yeah, but the most rewarding also.
Yeah, that is the one I have the least control of. I have basically 99% control of the other two things, but
That's because you
being
have
a
two
mom-
boys. I have two brothers. Oh, boys, control is definitely it's hard to have when you have sons.
So what's next? It's always it's been the same for some time. It's been it's always calibrating the balance. The balance today is not the balance tomorrow. Every few months I recalibrate. And when I first started, it was, should I focus on the business or the nonprofit? When should I have kids? But then I realized I'm the kind of person that's suited for like multiple things, like happening at the same time, like a chef with like multiple burners, like 12 burners. I love it. I love the thrill of it. So I decided I didn't want to turn one stove off, but I need to keep it all burning. And sometimes for me, the ironing is when one is heating up, I need to heat the other two up as well. Like, so it's constantly recalibrating the balance, I think, from here to the end of my life, even though the balance will look different. Sometimes high heat, sometimes low heat, whatever it is.
Yep.
I also think of it this way, like with my architecture work, there's the craft of making the buildings, and there's the administrative and management work of running a business. With my nonprofit work, there's the actions of serving the community, like truly rolling my sleeves up to do the work. And then there's the administration and guidance I need to give to my team, and messages I need to send to the public as well. In those things in itself are like 4 jobs. Like those are just 2 jobs. That's 4 jobs. And then with architecture, my 2 home bases are Philadelphia, where I used to live until 2016, and Hanfield, where I now live. Where I've lived in the past 3 years. And Philadelphia is an urban community. The houses there are a different type than the suburban houses in Hanfield. The businesses I design for are also of a different, it's edgier, it's more complex than the things in Hanfield. Or by Hanfield, I mean surrounding cities. I don't want to forget my amazing clients in other South Jersey cities. But my point is, even those are split into kind of mini businesses and many areas of focus. So when I balance my roles, it's to balance all these finer things too. I always want the client of my tiniest job to feel as special as a client for my biggest job, and the older adult whose story I'm listening to, and the younger listener whom I'm mentoring to listen to stories. Like, whatever the task is at hand is my most important task at the moment.
I think that goes back to your moral compass you were talking to. I mean, that's talking about. That's why you're so successful in a lot of things. Is you have that. You have your moral compass. You're set, and you operate your business like that. So people are important. It's not just a business. It's not just it's about the people, serving people, helping.
And if there's one common thread between, these 3 things, my 3 jobs, being a mom, being an architect, and being an advocate for older adult social health, it's very simple. It's just to serve people and serve communities. That's all it is. It's super simple. I'm just using a few different skills.
Yeah. And that leads me right into the last question, which I kind of, just through the threads that have run through this interview, can almost guess it. But I'd love to hear how you're going to describe it, because words come easy to you, and it's beautiful to listen to you talk. Talking is definitely a skill of yours. So I don't know if you got it from your grandmom. You said she was an amazing storyteller. Well, your story has been lovely as well, and I'd love to hear you define what success looks like in your life. And it could be different today, different tomorrow, but how do you define success for yourself?
Mm-hmm. Success for me is not about money. it's about people and relationships. And it's about making a difference in a genuine way. Not because it looks good in some photo or something for like a week, but because you know that the little bit of impact you've made in someone's life will carry them through for, at least a few years.
Yeah.
And then maybe they'll come back to you and you can make a deeper impact. Or maybe they continue to stick with you for decades and you can daily continue to make an impact. And I always think about individuals. I always think about that small level, because if you know in your heart you're able to make an impact on one person, you will then gain the confidence to make an impact on a community. And that's the same. The exact same goes for architecture and nonprofit work. I guess my drive is the drive to make a difference, make an impact.
It's awesome. Thanks for coming in for this interview today. You were wonderful. We're so happy to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much for your time, and thank you to your listeners for listening today.
Hey, we made this podcast for you. If you'd like to see it continue, please give it a share, follow it on Spotify, on iTunes, wherever you follow it, listen to it, comment, like, share it. That'll help keep us moving forward. Thanks for being a part of this podcast.